Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Irene and I'm a registered dietitian. So I've been getting a lot of questions about how to become a registered dietitian, and so I thought that I would just make a video about it today. So one thing that I do want to note though is I am a registered dietitian based in the United States. Other countries, they may have different requirements or regulations about becoming a dietitian, and I don't know anything about that. But I do know that there are some ways that you can become a registered dietitian in the United States if you are from a foreign country, but I just don't know enough about that to really talk about it. So now that I got some of those disclaimers out of the way, we're gonna go over the requirements to becoming a registered dietitian. Number 1, you must complete the education requirement. Number 2, you must complete the supervised hours. Number 3, you must pass the RD exam. And number 4, you must keep up your license by completing continuing education hours. So that's it, 4 steps. Seems pretty easy, right? It's actually not. There is actually a lot more to it, and it's kind of a complicated journey, and I'm definitely going to get more in depth into it throughout the video. But if you haven't hit subscribe yet, please be sure to do so. Also be sure to give this video a like because it really supports my channel. So without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so before I talk a little bit more about the education requirements, I want to first talk about ACEND. So you'll hear me mention ACEND a lot throughout the video, and what ACEND stands for is the Accreditation Council for Education in Nutrition and Dietetics, and they are part of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, and they kind of oversee the credentialing of registered dietitians. So basically that means that registered dietitian is a protected title, so no Joe Schmo on the street can just slap RD onto the end of their name and practice as a dietitian. You have to actually have met certain requirements that are outlined by ACEND. So now that we kind of got that out of the way, let's talk about the education. So in order to sit for the RD exam right now, you must have a bachelor's degree from a US accredited school, and you must have met the required coursework outlined by ACEND. Now, in 2024, they're actually going to be changing this requirement from a bachelor's degree to a master's degree. So in order to register for the exam, you have to have a master's degree. So there's no requirement on what you have to get your master's in, or what you have to get your bachelor's in even, or what you have to major in. That is all kind of up to you. You just have to have met the coursework requirements at some point, whether that's in your bachelor's or in your master's. And there's a couple of different ways that you can do that. You can either go into a coordinated program, so that actually contains the education portion requirements as well as the supervised hours into one program, or you can just do a didactic program, and that is just the education portion of it. So it's really up to you which kind of route you want to take. Me personally, I double majored in biochemistry and nutrition in undergrad, but I did not know that I wanted to become a dietitian until my senior year in college. So of course I didn't actually take all the required coursework that I needed outlined by ACEND, even though I majored in nutrition. So I decided to do a graduate coordinated program. So I went to grad school and I got a master's in public health, and that program included all of my requirements for ACEND, and then it also included my internships. So that is one way to do it, but of course you could kind of do the opposite. You could take all your required coursework and everything, do your internship in undergrad, and then get a master's in whatever the hell you want before you go take your exam. Kind of the important thing here is to just make sure that whatever program that you go into, that it is accredited by ACEND and it meets all of the requirements. So ACEND actually has a list of programs on their website that tells you which programs, and some of them might tell you which majors also will qualify. I have linked that down in the description box below, so make sure you check that out. Okay, so now that you got your education requirements down, you must complete your supervised hours. So This is kind of what people call their dietetic internships. And if you have chosen to do a coordinated program, you don't really have to worry about this part. It's built into your curriculum already. But if you did decide to choose a didactic program, you will have to apply into a dietetic internship. I'm not really familiar with this whole process of applying for an internship because that is not the route that I chose. I did a coordinated program. But from what I understand, you will have to apply via DICAS, which is their application system, and get matched into a dietetic internship. So it's kind of like how pre-med students will match into med school and doctors will match into residency programs, but the process is just slightly different, and the application process happens several times throughout the year. But not every program is going to be on every application cycle. So if there's a certain program that you want to attend, then you kind of have to make note of when the application cycle starts so that you can apply for it. The only kind of downside to applying into a dietetic internship program is that the match rate is actually kind of low. So if you're comparing it to doctors matching into residency, that match rate is 90 to 95%, but for dietetic internships, it's only about 60 to 70%. So that is something that you have to consider if you are wanting to do a didactic program applying into a dietetic internship. But regardless of whatever internship program that you decide to do or however you complete your hours, most internships will have you rotating to different sites. So there will most likely be a clinical site, a food service site, and a community nutrition site. And then various internships will have various additional other sites, or they might even let you pick what site you want to do. I personally was able to do a remote rotation with a sports dietitian, which I found pretty interesting. And most of these internships will last anywhere from like 6 months to about a year or so. So you definitely have to also factor that into your finances and how you're paying for school and things like that, because these internships are actually what I would refer to as a reverse internship, where you are paying them for your free labor. So you not only probably have to pay tuition to the internship or something like that, but you're also not getting paid for any of the work that you do. Some of them might have stipends, but I haven't really seen a lot of internship programs that will do that. So that is another thing. For me personally, my graduate program was actually remote and my classes were in the evening, so I was actually able to work while I was doing grad school. And because I was also in grad school during the pandemic, about half of my hours were completed remotely. So while that wasn't super ideal, that did allow me to work throughout most of my internship until I had to go to my clinical and food service rotation, which of course were in person. Okay, so now that you finished your coursework and your supervised hours, you're now eligible to take the RD exam. But before you can schedule your RD exam, your program director has to apply for your eligibility and give you a verification statement saying that you completed all the required coursework and also your supervised hours. So they will typically get with you right after you finish your supervised hours to gather all of the paperwork that they need to submit to the CDR. And this process will probably take about 1 to 2 weeks until they get back to you. Once you are approved to take the exam and you're eligible, you will receive an email with a link to schedule the exam. There's typically quite a bit of availability. I remember that when I was scheduling my exam, I think that there were actually slots available in the next week or maybe even that week. So that's not really something that you have to be really concerned about unless maybe you live in a rural area where there's only one testing center, or maybe you have to drive really far to get to one. But in general, I wouldn't really worry about not being able to schedule an exam or anything like that. So just do it whenever you're ready. And if you're kind of wanting tips on how to study, I also have another video which I'll link down below on how I passed the exam in 3 weeks without studying for 8 hours a day. So the last step to becoming a registered dietitian will kind of depend on what state you live in. Different states have different laws on who can practice MNT and dietetics. So in some states you have to be licensed in order to do that. Me personally, I live in Texas, so you don't actually have to have a license in order to practice MNT and dietetics, but you do need to be licensed in order to call yourself a licensed dietitian, so that title is protected. And although I don't have to be a licensed dietitian in Texas to practice, I decided to get the licensure anyways because I thought, why not? The fee wasn't like too exorbitant, and all I needed to do was submit proof that I was a registered dietitian and also take a little quiz on some of the practicing laws here in the state for dietitians, and that was pretty much it. But different states might have different requirements for becoming a licensed dietitian there, and you can usually find most of this information on a state government website. So you can just Google something like Texas licensed dietitian or Texas dietitian requirements, something like that, and usually something will pop up. So after you've passed the exam and you got your state license or whatever else you need, you have to make sure that you keep up with your license, and you can do so by completing continuing education hours. And I feel like most internships kind of talk about this and make you do a practice one, so I won't get too much into it, as you've probably heard of the PDP before and you kind of know how to log your hours and things like that. So it's pretty easy. There's a lot of different ways that you can do continuing education, lots of webinars. I believe you can do books sometimes and things like that. So they're not too hard to find, and the requirement is just 75 hours every 5 years, and I feel like that's not a lot. That's like 15 hours every year, and I also find them pretty helpful, and I always learn something new about some of the latest dietetics and nutrition research and things like that that will help me to better my practice. So I don't find it as something too taxing or anything like that. They're usually pretty informational and helpful. So that was it. Those are the 4 steps to becoming a registered dietitian and some of my experiences in this journey. Please be sure to give this video a like if you found it helpful, and also subscribe because it really helps my channel, and leave a comment down below telling me what video you would like to see next. Bye!